name is Tatiana Carter, and my paper was about no evidence that mask wearing in public spaces elicit risk compensation behavior during the COVID-19 pandemic. I got my article from Scientific Reports. The authors were Lasse S. Leibst, Peter Edgeby Ernst, Margin de Bruin, Josephine Thomas, and Marie R. Lindegard. And yes, it was published in January 2022. So background, everyone knows about how COVID, it kind of happened really suddenly in 2020, where everyone's lives were all shaken and there were a lot of mandates going around to try and stop the spreading of COVID. And one of those mandates were social distancing as well as wearing masks. And so concerns arose about whether mask wearing was actually effective towards the other mandates such as social distancing, and if just wearing a mask was causing a false sense of security, which meant that people were cutting back on the things that they were actually supposed to be doing, like people would still be going to parties and such, and it just was still as dangerous. So this is what this research looked at. So just an introduction into the research. The COVID-19 pandemic urged implementation of many different mandates, such as, like I said, wearing masks and social distancing. And so it started a rise of different problems. So there was a study conducted of 2 Dutch cities to look at observational and natural experimental methods on how the correlation between mask wearing and social distancing compliance stood hand in hand from both biological and behavior perspectives. So just wearing masks are on to the right. It shows how the SARS-CoV-19 virus can infect you through your eyelid, nasal cavity, lip, and oral cavity. And so once that happens, it is able to enter the mucosal cell, and then it releases its sRNA and ribosomes, and basically it just infects your body, which makes you feel sick. And so masks were mandated in order to combat that, because if a mask is covering your nasal cavity or your oral cavity, then that makes it harder for the virus to get in and infect you. So that was the purpose of the mask mandates in perspective of the biological aspect. So there were 2 studies conducted for this research. There was study number 1, which utilized video recordings from municipalities, and it accessed over 60,000 hours of footage from 63 different public cameras, and it took place during the first wave of COVID, so from May to June. And from the 60,000 hours that it collected of footage, it randomly selected 51 30-minute segments from, and the observation, during that time period, it observed 176 individuals with masks and 207 individuals without masks. So for an average about 25 seconds of each person. And so it utilized linear probability models in order to create a regression analysis. And I found that some of my issues with this study was that I thought that the use of security cameras may introduce a bias as to, since you're going to a public place, people may automatically put on a mask, whereas they wouldn't usually put on a mask, as well as it shows the societal practices evolved to mitigate disease spread. So reflecting of the human adaptation to biological threats and the dynamic nature of public health responses. And then study two was built in the same mindset of study one, and study two utilized a natural experimental setup due to the implementation of mask mandate. So it started in July and went to August, and it randomly selected 78 segments of 78 30-minute segments, and it observed about 423 individuals. And I thought that it was a problem that for one research, it selected 51 random segments, and the other one, it selected 78. I just think that was an error of, if you're comparing two studies and you have the same goal, I feel like it should be the same number for both, as well as there's a public health resilience to finding aid in assessing the resilience of urban populations to infectious diseases, as well as the problem with this study in general is that the study design relies on the quasi-experimental methods rather than a randomized controlled trial, which introduces the possibility of unaccounted for confounders influencing the results. So here's the results. There wasn't too many graphs in this research paper, but in the results, it just shows how study one and study two, there was no significant association between wearing a mask and the social distancing violations, and how in both studies, crowding positively correlated with social distancing violations. And it also found that mask mandates did not influence the level of crowding in treated areas. So yeah, this research basically, I feel like it makes sense based on how our world is operating in terms of COVID, especially in the beginning parts of, some people were just anti being told what to do with having to wear a mask, and they weren't thinking of the biological aspects of, if you're around someone and you're not using protection by using PPE, by having a mask or just washing your hands, then you're more susceptible to getting sick. And so the virus can enter through your body. And so the crowding really makes sense. Yeah. And so just a discussion of the article. Since the study focused on only two Dutch cities and focusing on outside, like how people interacted outside instead of like in crowded areas inside rather, then I feel like that makes it hard to transfer that to, since this was made overseas in two Dutch cities, I think it makes it harder to influence that into United States plates, because one, we don't know how they operate day to day in comparison to us, as well as it's just like we don't know how hard or how many restrictions there were for their government if you are not complying. And also the natural experimental analysis spans only 4 weeks follow-up period, and instead of, and that allows it to overlook the ability of what the long-term effects may be of the mask mandate on social distancing behavior. Um, and so, yeah. So instead of the study highlighting crowding as a more significant predictor of social distancing violations, emphasizing the importance of reducing crowded public spaces to promote adherence to preventative measures. And yeah, so and the impact to public health policy is just, the findings suggest that efforts to promote social distancing should prioritize interventions aimed at reducing crowding in addition to promoting mask wearing. And my critiques on the study were just basically, like I said, how it may be hard to transfer this study into a study that can be like into how it can be implemented into the United States. And the natural, yeah, these were all addressed. I just think that there were a couple of things that could have been done better in order to make it a stronger ability for people to protect themselves against the virus and spreading it, and understanding how wearing a mask and just basically being in contact with other people, like that can help protect you and help protect you against COVID-19. Thank you.